And let's move on to some other stories now and take you to Baku, Azerbaijan, where COP29 summit ended with countries adopting a $300 billion annual global finance target to help poorer nations deal with the impacts of climate change. But while the agreement was celebrated by some, others have criticized it. Esther Mokwariola reports from Baku.
After 2 weeks of intense talks, COP29 delegates in Baku reached an agreement to boost climate funding. The deal sets a target of $300 billion a year by 2035 to help developing nations adapt to and recover from climate disasters. The United Nations says the deal is a step forward.
This new finance goal is an insurance policy for humanity, amid worsening climate impacts hitting every country. But like any insurance policy, it only works if premiums are paid in full and on time.
But not everyone is convinced. Some delegates criticized the deal, saying it doesn't go far enough to address the challenges faced by vulnerable nations.
This is an insult to what the convention says. Should I remind us of what the convention says? That it noted that developed countries had the largest share of historical and current global emissions. This might be 1994, but it's still very current till now. It also said that the developed countries will take the lead, and this lead is climate finance. That the developing country is saying that it's taking the lead with $300 billion till 2035 is a joke.
However, and this is for everyone to see, this has been stage managed, and we are extremely disappointed with this incident.
The new target builds on the previous $100 billion annual pledge by wealthy nations, which was delivered 2 years late and expires in 2025. Next year, leaders will meet in Brazil's Amazon rainforest to map out the next phase of global climate action. For now, the focus remains on tackling the rising costs of climate change, from deadly floods in Africa and Asia to record-breaking disasters in Europe and the US. The effects are being felt worldwide.
With global temperatures expected to break again this year, the big question is whether this new deal will turn promises into action. Esther Mokwariola, TVC News, Azerbaijan.
The Executive Director, Health of Mother Earth Foundation, Nemo Bassett, joins us on the news for more to help us understand the outcome of the summit. It's good to have you join us on TVC News at 10.
Thank you very much.
The question of finance, it's always a big topic, at the climate change, the climate summit. But why do climate finance pledges keep falling short of what's needed? Because we've heard from some of the delegates, and they've criticized the $300 billion earmarked for financing for climate change.
Well, there are a number of reasons, one of which is that the rich polluting countries don't want to appear to accept responsibility for causing climate change, which is well known that they've taken up the space in the atmosphere that could safely be occupied with greenhouse gases. The fact that they should pay for the damage is what many activists have captured as the necessity of paying a climate debt, which they don't want to even acknowledge. As you mentioned in the analysis, the presentation, in 2009, there was a promise to raise $10 billion up to 2020, when that amount was to rise up to $100 billion. And that even the $10 billion was never met. The $100 billion was hardly met. The last time it was said to have been met was by adding every kind of so-called innovative financial items on it, including loans. And so because they don't want to accept responsibility, and even though they heard that the vulnerable nations, including African nations, had asked for at least 1.3 as a down payment, as a kind of deposit for tackling global warming, they came up with this minor amount. the amount of damage done every year is estimated at between $5 to $6 trillion. So 300 billion, which is just a promise, which may never be met, is nothing at all concerning addressing the crisis.
But if you take a look at the countries involved in this, in these emissions, how do we shift from promises to action in the fight for climate justice? Looking at United States, China, for instance.
Well, I think historically, the problem is with the global north, with the United States, with the European Union, Australia, Japan, and the rest. And, as I said, the Conference of Parties has turned into a space for geopolitical games. And so people come with their powerful positions. The negotiations are not really about how to tackle the global warming problem, but how to avoid responsibilities. This is what makes it difficult for countries like Nigeria, countries in Africa, in the small island states and other vulnerable nations to make headway in the negotiations. Because those who have created the problems don't want to move an inch towards solving that problem. They don't really want to. Everybody's looking at self-interest. And it's a global problem that requires that everyone sits on the table with a clear conscience and determination to do the right thing. In this particular COP that just ended, there was a new mechanism that was introduced called the global kind of mechanism that requires that everyone comes onto the table to decide to contribute and also to take action to tackle the problem, rather than working on the climate justice position of common but differentiated responsibilities. This is what is making it almost impossible to make a headway.
But, of course, time is running out. Is COP still an effective tool for tackling climate change, or should we look into something else?
This is a big question. I believe that, the COP space is very important because it's the only space we have at the time to discuss global warming and try to tackle the problem globally. But it's a general problem with multilateralism generally in the world today, because we're running in a world where might is power, and right, and almost the common good for everyone is being ignored as much as possible by those who can get with it. But at the COP, when the negotiations are going on in the hall, there are also a lot of meetings by people, by indigenous people, by activists on the outside, and real solutions are being profiled. This is why a lot of people believe that perhaps in Brazil, there may be a possibility of getting real decisions made. At this particular COP that just ended in Baku, the normal day of global action was just, and it was a very funny situation where activists usually would march on the street. They were only marching within the halls of the conference center, and even then they were not allowed to say a word. It was a mute march, which showed that voices are being silenced. And that is why it's even on the inside. So the decisions were made inside rooms before they were presented in the open hall, in the plenary, which was very unfair.
Very interesting topics, very interesting conversations you've dropped, and hopefully we'll get to discuss this more, and hopefully at the COP30, summit would have more conversations, very deliberate conversations, and there will be better climate finance targets for developing countries. Executive Director, Health of Mother Earth Foundation, Nimo Basa, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.